Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into Adam Grant's fantastic book, Think Again. It's all about a skill that he argues is one of the most crucial in our rapidly changing world, the power of knowing what you don't know and, more importantly, being willing to rethink it all.
So to really get what this is all about, we're going to start with a pretty intense story. It's a story that shows why being able to rethink isn't just some nice abstract skill. Sometimes it is literally a matter of life and death.
Picture this. It's the scorching summer heat of August 1949 in a place called Man Gulch, Montana. A team of 15 of the most elite firefighters you can imagine, they're called smoke jumpers, have just parachuted in to battle a wildfire. These guys are the best of the best.
But in an instant, everything changes. The fire does something unexpected. It jumps across the gulch, and now it's a 30-foot wall of flame racing right towards them. We're talking fast enough to cross 2 football fields in less than a minute. Their whole plan is out the window. This is no longer a firefight. It's a desperate race to survive.
Imagine the scene. The whole crew is scrambling up the steep, rocky hill, trying to outrun the inferno. And then their foreman, a guy named Wagner Dodge, does something that makes absolutely no sense to any of them. He stops running, pulls out a matchbook, and starts lighting the grass on fire, right in front of them.
You can just hear the panic in that quote, right? To his crew, this was complete madness. Why on earth would he light another fire when they were trying to escape one? But Dodge wasn't panicking. No, he was doing something else entirely. He was rethinking. And in that split second, he invented a brand new survival technique.
He created what's now known as an escape fire. See, by burning the grass ahead of him, he got rid of the fuel for the main wildfire. He created a small patch of safety. He then laid down in that charred earth, and the massive wall of flames just roared right over him, leaving him completely unharmed. It was this single brilliant act of rethinking that saved his life. Tragically, 12 of his crew members didn't make it.
Now, 2 other guys did survive, but they basically just got lucky. They were fast enough to outrun the blaze. But Dodge, he didn't survive because of his physical fitness. He survived because of his mental fitness. That incredible ability to just throw out all his assumptions under the most extreme pressure you can possibly imagine.
So what went wrong for the others?
Well, it came down to something that seemed so small, but was everything. They clung to their tools. While running for their lives up that steep hill, most of them were still carrying heavy axes, saws, and 20-pound packs. Dropping their tools felt like giving up, like admitting failure. These tools weren't just equipment, they were part of their identity. And get this, investigators figured out later that if they had just dropped that gear, they could have moved somewhere between 15 and 20% faster. That little boost in speed, that would have been the difference between life and death for most of them.
And that story really begs the question, right? What are the mental tools, the outdated beliefs, the old assumptions that we all cling to? Well, Adam Grant argues that we often get locked into one of 3 very rigid mindsets that stop us from letting go.
So Grant gives us these 3 roles that we all fall into. First, you've got preacher mode. That's when we're defending our beliefs as if they're sacred truths. Then there's the prosecutor mode. We go into that when we're busy pointing out all the flaws in other people's arguments. And finally, there's the politician, where we're not really after the truth, we're just trying to win over an audience.
You want to see a perfect real-world example of this? Just look at the fall of BlackBerry. Its leader got stuck in these mindsets. He preached about how great the physical keyboard was. He prosecuted the idea of putting a full web browser on a phone, and he politicked to his existing customers. Meanwhile, you've got Apple, where engineers managed to convince a very skeptical Steve Jobs to completely rethink his own opinions about phones. And well, we all know how that turned out.
And here's the absolute kicker. Being really smart doesn't save you from this trap. In fact, some research shows it can make you even worse at rethinking. Why? Because the smarter you are, the better you are at finding arguments to support your own flawed ideas, instead of searching for the truth.
Okay, so if those mindsets are the problem, what's the answer? Grant says we need to adopt a 4th, much more flexible mindset. We need to learn to think like a scientist. And no, this doesn't mean you need a beaker and a lab coat. It's a way of thinking. It's about treating your beliefs not as sacred truths, but as hypotheses, as best guesses that need to be tested. It means you are actively, genuinely looking for ways you might be wrong, not just for proof that you're right. And you might think, okay, that sounds nice, but does it actually work? Well, check this out.
They ran an experiment with startup founders in Italy, the ones who are trained to think like scientists, to treat their business strategy like a theory to be tested. Well, a year later, their companies had earned over 40 times more revenue than the control group. 40 times. Why? Simple. They were way more willing to pivot and rethink their whole approach when the evidence told them to.
So it all comes down to this choice between two cycles. On one hand, you have the overconfidence cycle. It starts with pride, which leads to conviction, and then you just look for validation for what you already believe. But on the other hand, you can enter the virtuous rethinking cycle. That one starts with humility, which sparks doubt, which leads to curiosity, and that's what ultimately leads you to new discoveries.
But here's the thing, to even get into that rethinking cycle, you need to be in the right headspace. You need just the right amount of confidence. Not too much, but also not too little.
Because you've got these two extremes, right? On one end, you have what Grant calls the armchair quarterback syndrome. This is where your confidence is way higher than your actual competence. On the other end, you've got imposter syndrome. That's where your competence is actually much higher than your confidence. Both of these extremes, they just shut down your ability to rethink effectively.
So where do you want to be? Right in the middle, in this sweet spot he calls confident humility. It's this beautiful balance where you believe in your ability to figure things out. You have faith that you can learn, but at the same time, you have the humility to know that you don't have all the answers right now.
And that brings us to what I think is one of the most powerful ideas in the whole book. Rethinking isn't about being wishy-washy or having no convictions. It's about changing what you tie your identity to. It's about anchoring your sense of self, not in being right, but in your willingness to always be learning.
Remember those firefighters back in Man Gulch? They couldn't drop their tools because their identity was all wrapped up in them. A firefighter carries tools. Without them, who were they? So the question this explainer leaves you with is a personal one. What are the mental tools, the beliefs, the assumptions, the opinions that you are clinging to? And who could you become if you had the courage to let them go?